buddy?
Soldier?
Hey, how's the violence?
Панкуха будет. Ну, такой пойдет. Будет дядька бородатый.
Now, Arcunner.
Hold on, Captain. That one isn't wearing your beloved uniform. They don't take orders from you. Sorry about that, friend.
We land in 10. Strap in.
I never got to brief you on your ego event, so we really need to... What the hell?
Sir, they need you on the bridge.
I think I will actually get to my seat. When we land, don't go anywhere. The ego activation can be a bit jarring without a proper briefing.
Relax. It's just a little turbulence. Completely normal.
No, it's not. We're all gonna die.
She's actually quite charming once you get to know her.
Brace yourself, Cass. This could be real bad. Okay. Which one of these dealies opens this bitch? You can interface with me to signal when you're ready to proceed. Let's try it. We need to find Mr. Von Bach, but first, we'll need to gear up. Von Bach Industries had personal defense technologies aboard the Stratocarrier. I placed a marker on our map where we'll find some. Once you equip that, it will allow me to activate the shield. The shields are running. We're going to need another weapon option. I'm picking up a signal from a crashed mobile armory. Let's hurry. We need to collect the necessary equipment as soon as possible so we can start looking for Mr. Von Bach. The light machine gun is big, loud, and powerful. Its bursts are capable of crippling the enemy from both close and afar. Particular weapon types work better for specific situations, so you'll want to get used to switching back and forth between the primary and secondary weapons. I'm detecting some explosives nearby. We could definitely use those. I've put the location on the map. This supply pod is filled with grenades. Grab one and equip it.
Да, главное, что, конечно, на английском.
I think you already know how this works. Pull the pin, throw, and get out of there. Don't stray too far from my projection. We need to calibrate some behaviors before moving on. Now that we're geared up, it's time to train you on the ego powers. First, we'll try Cloak. While using Cloak, you are completely invisible to enemies. Use the power to sneak up behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack. Cloak must be activated to sneak behind the projections and attack.
Hello!
Now we'll test the overcharge power. While using overcharge, your damage inflicted on the enemy is significantly increased. Shoot the projection while overcharge is activated. The projection shields are too powerful. Use the overcharge power to break them. The projection shields are too powerful. Use the overcharge power to break them. I'll enable the decoy power now. Decoy allows us to create a projection in your likeness that will fool and distract the enemy. Take down the projections while they're distracted by your decoy. The projections are only vulnerable when their attention is on the decoy. The blur power is now enabled. Blur will allow us to move at extreme speeds and increases melee strength during close combat. With blur active, rush the projections and strike them with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. You must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks. must activate the blur power and strike these projections with melee attacks.